Today we'll talk about topic 7, business income insurance. Commercial property coverage usually covers physical properties. The main reason being loss to these tangible assets are very easy to verify. And most importantly, less of a moral hazard problem. However, the loss in value of the property are usually not the only loss that a business may sustain. The income can be lost when property is damaged or destroyed. Therefore, we use business income insurance to cover these consequential losses. Now, here's a question. Will business income loss exposure include the loss of business income due to the exchange rate change? The answer is no, because this type of risk is no longer pure risk. And what type of risk is it? Well, it is speculative risk. Firms purchase business income insurance that covers the reduction in an organization's income when operations are interrupted by damage to the property caused by a covered peril. So be very careful. The consequential loss of net income need to be result of a covered peril for the business income loss to be covered by the insurance. So the business income loss is measured as the reduction in the firm's net income. And the firm's net income is evaluated as the difference between revenues, such as money received by goods or services, and expenses, such as money paid for merchandise, rent, and insurance. There are essentially 3 states of the world with regard to net income. First, when net income is a positive number, there is going to be a profit. Second, when net income is a negative number, there's going to be a net loss. Thirdly, when net income is 0, then the firm breaks even. During a business interruption, some of the organization's expenses, they're called as continuing expenses, will continue, and other expenses, called non-continuing expenses, will not continue. Will the insurance provide coverage to a non-continuing expense? The answer is no, because there is not going to be expenses involved when the firm endures loss. There are certain factors influencing the continuing expenses. The examples of continuing expenses include the payroll of key employees, debt repayments, and taxes. On the other hand, there are certain examples of extra expenses that might be incurred to continue operation after a physical loss that could include the cost to rent temporary office space, overtime wages to employees, overnight air shipment of needed repair parts. So these are the continuing expense that would not commonly exist if there is not a loss. As mentioned before, business income insurance does not apply to speculative risk. Now, even if it is a pure risk, some losses are not covered either. In order for business income insurance to apply, the following must occur according to the usual business income insuring agreement. There must be interruption of operations, and these interruptions must be caused by property damage from a covered peril. And these losses must be incurred to the property at locations or situations described in the policy, and the resulting in a loss of business income and or extra expenses. Before the loss occurs, the risk management and insurance professionals need to do pre-loss analysis of business income and extra expense exposures for the purpose to select the appropriate risk control and risk financing measures. These key factors, when doing pre-loss analysis, include the events that could cause a business income loss, damage to property at the organization's own premises, damage to property away from the organization's own premises, time factors of business income loss, small physical damage loss, law interruption, distinguishing between continuing and non-continuing expenses. An organization can also suffer a business income loss because of physical damage to property at locations not owned or controlled by the organization, which creates a dependent property exposure. The dependent property exposure is defined as the possibility of incurring business or physical loss occurring on the premises of an organization that the insured depends on for materials, products, or sales. There are four types of dependency that including outsourcing, dependency on key supplies, dependency on key buyers, dependency on leaders' properties in a retail setting. Another type of damage to property away from the organization's own premises is the act of civil authorities. For example, a civil authority, such as police or fire department, can close the entire street or area to traffic because of unsafe condition. This action might prevent access as well as occupancy, resulting in the loss of business income. When doing pre-loss analysis, there will be two factors of business income loss. These two factors affect the duration of business interruption include how long it will take to repair or replace the damaged property, and how long it will take to get customers to return to the same levels as before the interruption occurred. There are certain small physical damage loss could cause a large business income loss. And due to the damage occurred in a bottleneck that could bring operations to a standstill. Flowcharts are often effective in identifying bottlenecks. However, some bottlenecks are still be difficult to identify by any method before a loss occurs. For example, suppose that a large plant is prohibited from operating without adequate pollution control devices. A small fire in the pollution control system could shut down the entire plant, and these type of loss will be categorized as bottlenecks. Fluctuation in income may affect business income loss exposures. If a business experiences seasonal fluctuation in its income, the severity of a business interruption can be much greater if the interruption occurs during a period when income is at its highest level. For such businesses, a short business interruption at the busiest season could cause a significant business income loss. With these businesses, the safest assumption is that the interruption will occur at the worst possible time, and that is during the organization's peak season. Again, the safest approach to estimate the potential severity of business income loss is to assume a worst case scenario, that is, a shutdown at the worst possible time of year, lasting for the maximum amount of time that it would take to replace a destroyed building and equipment, restore inventory and personnel to their pre-loss status, and regain lost consumers. Therefore, An organization's potential business income and extra expense loss estimates in this matter is referred to the EML, such as estimated maximum loss. One question you may ask is, how far should they be projected? It depends on the potential duration of a business interruption. If the potential business interruption is longer, then it must be projected further away. Another question you have may be, should you estimate it on a pre-tax or after-tax basis? The answer is pre-tax, because the business income loss payments will be subject to income tax. Also, when estimating retention levels, on the other hand, a risk analysis evaluates losses on an after-tax basis because taxes reduce the effect of the retention. When measuring potential loss severity, it is important to update and project income and expenses figures when estimating maximum business income loss, because the risk analysis is attempting to estimate the probable maximum loss for an event that will happen in the future. There are several factors should be considered when estimating maximum loss of business income that include co-insurance basis, business income worksheet, non-continuing expenses, time required to restore property, peak periods, extended business income loss, anticipated changes in expenses and profits during restoration period, extra expense, compensation for possible errors, and co-insurance percentage. When estimating an organization's maximum loss of business income for insurance purpose, the goal is to develop a solid foundation that can be used to select an appropriate co-insurance percentage and the amount of insurance. So the co-insurance basis is very important. In determining an organization's estimated maximum loss, which is EML, the co-insurance basis, which is a projection of income and expenses for the following 12 months following the policy inception, can be used as a starting point. The co-insurance basis is calculated as the sum of insurer's estimated net income and operating expenses for the next 12 months following policy inception, minus only those expenses listed in the business income worksheet. Although many operating expenses might be used to eliminate it during a period of business interruption, only those items specifically listed in the worksheet or in optional endorsement are deducted in calculating the co-insurance basis. Therefore, the co-insurance basis times the applicable co-insurance percentage will equal the amount of insurance required to avoid a co-insurance penalty. However, several factors should also be considered with corresponding modifications made to co-insurance basis. These factors include the business income worksheet, non-continuing expenses, time required to restore property, peak periods, extended business income loss, extra expense, anticipated changes in expenses and profits during restoration period, compensation for possible errors, co-insurance percentage. The co-insurance basis that is used as starting point for EML is determined by using a business income worksheet. The business income worksheet is a worksheet for calculating the amount of insurance necessary to comply with the co-insurance condition of business income insurance forms, for reporting business income values to the insurer, or for providing underwriters with information they need to evaluate an organization's business income loss exposure. Underwriters often require that the insured submit a completed worksheet to aid them in evaluating the exposure. The loss adjusters follow a procedure similar to the worksheet calculations in determining whether the insured has complied with coinsurance requirements. One of the principal purposes of the worksheet is to determine the amount of insurance needed to comply with the coinsurance condition in business income forms. The coinsurance condition requires the insured to carry an amount of insurance equal to the chosen coinsurance percentage times the coinsurance basis, so that to avoid a coinsurance penalty. One thing you need to keep in mind is that the coinsurance basis is sometimes not necessarily a reasonable approximation of the estimated maximum loss of business entirely, because the maximum interruption period for a business is rarely precisely 12 months. And in addition, some expenses may not continue during a business interruption, thereby should be reduced the loss of net income experienced. The next thing to do after constructing a business income worksheet will be to deduct non-continuing expenses. The non-continuing expenses will be deducted from the business income worksheet because if business stops, these expenses will not continue and therefore shouldn't be covered under insurance. After that, the next thing to do after we deducted the non-continuing expense is to estimate the time required to restore property. A business should adjust its EML to the maximum anticipated period of restoration, which may be over or under 12 months. The longer the time required to restore property, the larger estimated maximum loss would be. Now we know that EML is on a 12-month basis, so if the maximum expected period of restoration for a specific business is only 6 months, the EML will be adjusted accordingly. What about peak periods? How do the peak periods affect the calculation of the estimated maximum loss for a business? If a business experiences sharp variation in business month to month, the business should apply the maximum anticipated restoration period to the months of highest business activity, because this is where the highest business income is received and potentially lost. Some other factors that should also be taken into consideration when estimating maximum loss of business income would be the extended business income loss, anticipated changes in expenses and profits during the period of restoration, extra expenses, and compensation for possible errors. When estimating maximum loss of business, one should also consider the extended business income loss, which is an additional coverage in business income insurance. This coverage insures income loss incurred for up to 30 days after the damaged property is restored to use. For the purpose of estimating exposure and arranging business income insurance, the EML should include the extended business income exposure only to the extent that it is insured. With the previous steps, the coinsurance basis may be calculated and the EML would be established. Then the risk analysis could move on to calculate the coinsurance percentage. To calculate the coinsurance percentage, simply divide the estimated maximum loss by coinsurance basis. For example, assume ABR company has an EML of $3,370,000 and a coinsurance basis of $5 million. What would be the percentage of coinsurance? Well, the percentage of coinsurance would be given by dividing the EML by the co-insurance basis, and that will give us a result of 0.67, which is approximately 70%. The next step is to determine the limit of insurance to purchase by multiplying the co-insurance percentage by the co-insurance basis. To calculate the limit of insurance to purchase, simply multiply the co-insurance percentage by the co-insurance basis. For example, assume a BR company has co-insurance percentage of 67%, which is calculated from the previous slide, with a co-insurance basis of $5 million. What would be the limit of insurance to purchase? Then the limit of insurance to purchase will be 0.7 multiplied by $5 million, which gives us a $3,500,000 co-insurance basis limit of insurance. The Commercial Property Program of Insurance Service Office, with the short form being ISO, includes coverage forms for insuring business income and extra expense loss exposures. So basically, if your loss to be covered, they need to satisfy the following requirements. The actual loss of business income you sustain due to the necessary suspension of your operations during the period of restorations, and it must be caused by direct physical loss or damage to the property at the described premises, and the loss or damage need to be caused by a covered causes of loss. The crucial thing you need to know about the actual loss of business income you sustain is that under this income coverage, it is not necessary for an insured to have been making a net profit to be able to collect for the loss of business income. A business operating at a net loss can sustain a business loss income if a suspension of operation increases the net loss beyond what had been expected. When business is interrupted, there will be a period for restoration. It is referred as the period during which business income loss is covered under the BIC forms. It begins 72 hours after the physical loss occurs and ends when the property should, with reasonable speed and similar quality, be repaired or replaced, or when business is resumed at the new permanent location, whichever occurs first. Therefore, the business income coverage has a waiting period of 72 hours, in which business loss is not covered. However, this waiting period does not apply to extra expense losses. This is appropriate because many extra expenses are incurred in the first few days after the damage. In addition, even for the period of restoration, the 72 hours waiting period for business income coverage can be either entirely eliminated or reduced to 24 hours through the use of business income changes beginning of the period of restoration endorsements. Please refer to the start here. When evaluating business income coverage, the reasonable speed and similarity quality counts the reasonable delays. The phrase reasonable speed and similar quality is important. Sometimes reasonable delay would be included due to the delay in shipping, unusual severe weather, delays that are beyond insurer's control, civil activities such as striking, if it does not occur at the construction site. Sometimes certain property must be physically damaged for business income coverage to apply. The damage can be any real or personal property at the described premises or personal property in the open or in a vehicle within 100 feet of the described premises. The property can be owned by the insured or by the others. It need not to be property that is covered under the insured's commercial property insurance. We said that there is no waiting period for extra expense coverage. This is because the extra expense is necessary expenses the insured incurs during the period of restoration that would not have been incurred if there had been no physical loss caused by a covered peril, and occurred immediately when business is interrupted.